I'm Sarah Matthews, 32, a small-town librarian from Ohio who thought she knew everything about her husband of 8 years. While cleaning out Michael's home office yesterday, I found a receipt tucked inside an old tax folder, a receipt for a vasectomy procedure dated 3 years ago. The paper trembled in my hands as I read it twice, then 3 times, my 6-month pregnant belly pressing against the desk edge. My world shattered in that moment. Every conversation about starting a family, every month of trying, every doctor's appointment where he held my hand and whispered reassurances, all of it had been an elaborate lie. But as I sat there, feeling our baby kick inside me, I realized this receipt wasn't just proof of his betrayal. It was evidence of something far more sinister, something that would change everything I thought I knew about the man I married. If you've ever discovered a truth that made you question everything, you'll understand what happened next. I stumbled to our bedroom, my legs weak, clutching the receipt like evidence of a crime. On the nightstand sat our wedding album, its leather cover worn from years of occasional browsing. I opened it with shaking hands, staring at the photograph of Michael and me exchanging vows 8 years ago. His smile looked so genuine, so full of love and promise. Had he already been planning this deception even then? Memories came flooding back with painful clarity. Our second date, when I'd mentioned wanting children someday, and how his eyes had lit up. "I can't wait to be a father," he'd said, taking my hand across the restaurant table. "I want a house full of kids with you." Those words had sealed my heart to him completely. After our wedding, we'd agreed to wait a few years to get financially stable before starting our family. Michael had been so supportive, so patient. When I turned 30 and felt ready, he'd seemed just as excited. "Let's throw away the birth control and see what happens," he'd said, kissing my forehead. "I'm ready when you are." But now I understood the timeline differently. 3 years ago, right around the time we'd started trying, he'd secretly undergone a vasectomy. While I was taking prenatal vitamins and tracking my ovulation, he was recovering from a procedure designed to make pregnancy impossible. While I was crying each month when my period arrived, he was consoling me with lies. Knowing full well why I wasn't getting pregnant, the cruelest part was how convincing he'd been. He'd held me when I cried, suggested we see a fertility specialist, even agreed to lifestyle changes that might improve our chances. He'd acted disappointed month after month, while secretly knowing it would never happen. The elaborate performance of it all made me nauseous. I flipped through more pages of the album, remembering our 5th anniversary when I brought up adoption. Michael had been hesitant. "Let's give it a little more time," he'd said. "I really want to experience pregnancy with you." The irony was so bitter I could taste it. Our 6th anniversary, same conversation. Our 7th, I'd been more insistent about seeing a doctor. Michael had agreed that somehow we never quite got around to making the appointment. There was always something: work stress, scheduling conflicts, insurance issues. Now I realized these were stalling tactics. The baby kicked hard, as if responding to my distress. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling the strong movements of this impossible child. If Michael had a vasectomy 3 years ago, whose baby was I carrying? The question hit me like a physical blow. In 8 years of marriage, I'd never been unfaithful, never even considered it. But if Michael couldn't be the father, then who? My mind raced through possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. Had I been assaulted and somehow blocked it out? Had someone taken advantage of me when I was drunk or unconscious? The thought made my stomach turn, but I couldn't remember any incidents like that. I closed the wedding album and sat in the silence of our bedroom, feeling utterly alone. The man I trusted with my heart, my dreams, my future, had been lying to me for years. And somehow, despite his deception, I was carrying a child that couldn't possibly be his. I spent the rest of the night on my laptop, researching everything I could about vasectomies. The medical websites were clear. Vasectomy is over 99% effective at preventing pregnancy. The procedure involves cutting the vas deferens, the tubes that carry sperm from the testicles. While reversals are possible, they're complex surgeries with no guarantee of success. More disturbing was what I learned about vasectomy failure. In rare cases, the vas deferens can reconnect naturally, but this typically happens within the first few months after surgery. After 3 years, the chance of natural reconnection is virtually zero. The medical literature was unambiguous. If Michael had a vasectomy 3 years ago, he could not be the father of my child. I pulled out the shoebox from my closet, the one containing all my pregnancy tests from the past 3 years. Month after month of negative results, each one a small heartbreak. I'd saved them all, unable to throw away what felt like evidence of my failure. Looking at them now, I understood they weren't evidence of my failure at all. They were proof of Michael's success. The irony was devastating. I'd blamed myself for our inability to conceive. I'd changed my diet, taken supplements, tracked my cycles obsessively. I'd even considered that maybe I was infertile, that maybe God didn't want me to be a mother. The self-doubt had eaten away at my confidence, made me question my worth as a woman, all while Michael watched me suffer, knowing exactly why I couldn't get pregnant. The positive test from 6 months ago sat at the bottom of the box, the 2 pink lines still visible. I'd been so shocked that day, so overwhelmed with joy and disbelief. Michael had been at work, so I'd called him immediately. His reaction had been strange, a long pause before he'd said, "That's wonderful, honey. I'll be right home." When he'd arrived, he'd seemed genuinely surprised, almost confused. Now I understood why I thought about our first doctor's appointment. When we'd heard the baby's heartbeat for the first time, Michael had cried, or at least I thought he had. Looking back, his tears might have been from panic rather than joy. The doctor had congratulated us on our miracle baby after so many years of trying. If only she'd known how much of a miracle it really was. The baby's movements were stronger now, more frequent. I'd been told this was normal for 6 months, but knowing what I knew now, every kick felt like a question mark. Who was this child's father? The thought terrified me, but I couldn't avoid it any longer. I started making a list of every man I'd had contact with over the past 6 months. My male colleagues at the library, delivery drivers, the mailman, our neighbors, repair technicians who'd come to the house. The list felt ridiculous and invasive, but I was desperate for answers. Most of these men I'd barely spoken to, let alone had any intimate contact with. Then I remembered the night 6 months ago when everything changed. I'd been feeling particularly low about our fertility struggles, and Michael had been working late again. I'd been drinking wine alone, something I rarely did. David, Michael's younger brother, had stopped by unexpectedly. He'd said he was in the neighborhood and wanted to check on me because Michael had mentioned I was feeling down. David had always been kind to me, more attentive than Michael in some ways. He'd listened to my concerns about starting a family, offered comfort when I needed it. That night, he'd stayed late talking, and we both had too much wine. The details were fuzzy, but I remembered feeling grateful for his presence, for someone who actually seemed to care about my feelings. I'd woken up the next morning on the couch, still in my clothes, with a blanket over me. David was gone, but there was a note saying he'd made sure I was comfortable before leaving. I'd felt embarrassed about drinking so much and had never mentioned the evening to Michael. Now, that night took on a completely different significance. Could David be the father? The timeline fit perfectly. The thought made me sick to my stomach, but I couldn't ignore the possibility. If Michael couldn't be the father, and David was the only other man I'd been alone with during the relevant time period, then the impossible was beginning to look like the only explanation. The next morning, Michael left for work as usual, kissing my forehead and asking how I was feeling. The casual normalcy of it made my skin crawl. I watched him drive away, then immediately began searching through his belongings more thoroughly. The vasectomy receipt had been hidden in plain sight, which made me wonder what else he might be concealing. I started with his dresser drawers, feeling like a criminal in my own home. In the back of his sock drawer, I found a small key I'd never seen before. It was too small for a house or car, maybe for a lockbox or filing cabinet. I made a mental note and continued searching. His closet revealed nothing unusual, just the typical collection of work clothes and casual wear. But when I checked the pockets of his winter coat, I found a business card for a hotel in downtown Cleveland. The Wellington Hotel, with a date written on the back in Michael's handwriting from 2 months ago. He had told me he was working late that night. My heart was racing as I moved to his car. Michael had always been protective of his vehicle, claiming he liked to keep it organized for work. Now I wondered if there were other reasons. The glove compartment contained the usual paperwork, but tucked behind the owner's manual was a second cell phone. I'd never seen this phone before. It was older than Michael's main phone, a basic model with a prepaid plan. My hand shook as I turned it on, praying it wouldn't require a passcode. It didn't. The text messages were a revelation. Dozens of exchanges with someone named Jennifer dating back over a year. The messages started innocently, enough work discussions, casual conversation, but they quickly became more intimate. Can't wait to see you tonight from 3 weeks ago. You make me feel alive again from last month. I love you from Jennifer just 5 days ago. The phone calls were even more damning. Hours-long conversations with Jennifer, always when Michael claimed to be working late or traveling for business. There were also calls to other numbers I didn't recognize, including one to a medical office that I realized must be his urologist. I scrolled through the messages, reading their entire relationship unfold. Jennifer was his coworker, someone he'd mentioned casually over the years. According to the text, they'd been having an affair for over a year. The messages revealed intimate details about their relationship, including discussions about their future together, but the most devastating discovery was a message from 2 weeks ago. Jennifer had written, "I'm so glad you had that procedure done. I'm not ready for kids yet, and I love that we don't have to worry about accidents." Michael had responded, "Best decision I ever made. Sarah still doesn't know, and I plan to keep it that way." They'd been discussing his vasectomy. He'd gotten the procedure not because he didn't want children, but because he didn't want children with me. He wanted a future with Jennifer, unencumbered by the responsibilities of fatherhood. The casual way they discussed my ignorance made me feel like a fool. I kept reading, looking for any mention of my pregnancy. When I found it, I wished I hadn't. "Sarah's pregnant," Michael had texted Jennifer 6 months ago. "I don't know how it's possible, but she is." Jennifer's response was telling. "Are you sure it's yours? Maybe this is your way out." Michael's reply chilled me. "I'm not sure of anything anymore, but I have to figure this out before she does." So Michael knew that pregnancy was impossible. He'd known from the moment I told him that he couldn't be the father. Yet he'd played along, pretending to be excited, going to doctor appointments, discussing baby names, all while texting his mistress about how to handle the situation. I found more recent messages discussing their plans. Jennifer was pushing Michael to leave me, especially now that I was pregnant with another man's child. "She's going to figure it out eventually," Jennifer had written. "Why not just tell her the truth and be done with it?" Michael's response revealed the calculating nature of his deception. "I need to be careful about how I handle this. If I leave, now she get half of everything. If I can prove infidelity on her part, I might be able to keep more of our assets. The pregnancy is actually perfect. It's proof she cheated." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Michael wasn't just having an affair, he was strategically planning to destroy my life. He was going to let me go through the pregnancy, bond with the baby, and then use the biological impossibility as evidence of my infidelity in divorce proceedings. He was setting me up to lose everything: my marriage, my reputation, possibly even custody of my child. I sat in the car, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal, feeling utterly helpless. The man I loved and trusted was not only cheating on me, but actively plotting against me. And I still had no idea who the father of my baby was or how I'd gotten pregnant in the first place. The small key I'd found earlier suddenly seemed more significant. If Michael was hiding a second phone, what else might he be concealing? I had to find out what that key unlocked, because clearly I'd only scratched the surface of his deception. I drove to Michael's office that afternoon, my mind racing with questions about Jennifer. I've met her briefly at a few company events over the years, an attractive woman in her late 20s, unmarried, ambitious. She worked in marketing while Michael was in sales, so their paths crossed frequently. I'd never thought much about her, never saw her as a threat. She'd always been polite to me, even friendly. The betrayal felt personal in a way that went beyond the affair itself. I parked across the street from their office building, watching employees come and go during lunch hour. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad television movie, but I needed to see them together. I needed to understand the reality of what I was dealing with. After about 20 minutes, I saw them exit the building together. Michael had his hand on the small of Jennifer's back, a gesture that was intimate and protective. They walked to a nearby cafe, sitting at a corner table where they could speak privately. Even from a distance, I could see the easy familiarity between them, the way Jennifer leaned into Michael's space, how he smiled at her in a way I hadn't seen in years. They looked like a couple, not two people having a secret affair, but a genuine couple comfortable with each other's presence. It struck me that this wasn't just about sex or excitement. Michael was emotionally invested in Jennifer in a way he no longer was with me. Maybe. Hadn't been for years. I followed them at a distance when they left the cafe, watching as they walked to the Wellington Hotel, the same hotel whose business card I'd found in Michael's coat pocket. They moved through the lobby like they belonged. There, like they'd done this many times before. The desk clerk greeted them with recognition, handing Michael a key card without any paperwork. They had a regular room. Sitting in my car outside the hotel, I felt the full weight of my situation. My husband was having an affair with a woman who knew about his vasectomy, who was encouraging him to leave me. They were planning a future together, while I was carrying another man's child. Completely unaware of the trap being set around me, I drove home in a daze, processing everything I'd learned. The house felt different now, like a stage set rather than a home. Every family photo, every piece of furniture we'd chosen together, every small domestic detail felt like evidence of a lie I'd been living. I found the small key again and began searching more systematically for what it might unlock. In the basement, behind some old Christmas decorations, I found a small fire-safe box I'd never noticed before. The key fit perfectly. Inside the box were documents that revealed the full scope of Michael's deception. Bank statements for an account I didn't know existed, showing regular deposits of money from our joint account. He'd been systematically moving funds, building a nest egg for his new life with Jennifer. There were also hotel receipts going back over a year, documenting the timeline of their relationship, but the most shocking discovery was a folder labeled Divorce Strategy. Inside were printouts of articles about infidelity and divorce proceedings, notes about asset protection, and a business card for a divorce attorney. Michael had been planning this for months, maybe longer. He'd researched how to minimize his financial losses, how to use my pregnancy as evidence of adultery, how to turn his own deception into my fault. There was also a letter apparently a draft Michael had written but never sent. It was addressed to me, laying out his version of events. In it, he expressed his shock and disappointment about my pregnancy, questioning how it could have happened given our fertility struggles. He wrote about feeling betrayed and unable to trust me, about needing time to process the situation. The letter painted him as the victim and me as the unfaithful wife. Reading his planned narrative was devastating. He'd crafted a story where I was the villain, where my pregnancy was proof of my infidelity rather than evidence of his lies. He was going to present himself as the heartbroken husband who'd tried for years to have children with his wife, only to discover she was carrying another man's baby. The cruelest part was how he planned to use my own desperate desire for children against me. All those months of trying, all my tears and disappointments, all the self-doubt and medical consultations, he was going to reframe all of it as evidence of my guilt. The fact that I'd been so committed to having his child would somehow become proof that I'd sought it elsewhere. I sat on the basement floor, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy I was only beginning to understand. Michael hadn't just betrayed me. He'd systematically planned to destroy my life. He'd manipulated my love for him, my trust, my desire for a family, all while building a case against me. The baby kicked strongly, reminding me of the central mystery that remained unsolved. If Michael couldn't be the father who was, and how had I gotten pregnant without knowing it? The questions were becoming more urgent as I realized I was running out of time. Michael was planning to make his move soon, and I needed to understand the full truth before he did. I thought again about that night 6 months ago with David. The gaps in my memory, the way I'd woken up on the couch. The timeline was too perfect to be coincidental. But the idea that my brother-in-law could be the father of my child opened up possibilities I wasn't ready to face. I needed concrete medical evidence about Michael's vasectomy, so I called his urologist's office the next morning. I told the receptionist I was Michael's wife and needed to confirm some details about his procedure for insurance purposes. She was initially hesitant, but when I provided his social security number and date of birth, she agreed to help. Mrs. Matthews, I see here that your husband had a vasectomy 3 years ago in March. The procedure was successful, and his follow-up tests showed complete sterility. There's a note here that he specifically requested we not contact him at home about any appointments or results. Is there something specific you need to know? My heart pounded as I asked, is there any chance the procedure could have failed? Could he become fertile again after 3 years? Extremely unlikely. We did 2 post-operative sperm counts at 3 and 6 months, both showing 0 sperm. Natural recanalization is very rare and typically occurs within the first few months. After 3 years, the chance is virtually 0. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking. The medical evidence was conclusive Michael could not be the father of my child. The receptionist's mention of his request for no home contact stung deeply. He'd been so careful to hide this from me, planning every detail of his deception. I drove to the medical complex where Michael had his procedure, needing to see the place where my marriage had effectively ended. The urology clinic was in a modern building, surrounded by other medical offices. I sat in the parking lot, imagining Michael walking in 3 years ago, making the decision to end our chances of having children together while I waited at home, completely unaware. The weight of his betrayal was crushing. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake. It was a calculated decision to destroy our future while maintaining the illusion of trying. He let me blame myself for our inability to conceive, watched me suffer through each failed cycle, all while knowing it was impossible. I thought about the conversations we'd had about fertility treatments, about how I'd suggested we both get tested to see if there were any issues. Michael had always deflected, saying we should be patient, that stress might be affecting our ability to conceive. Now I understood these were stalling tactics. Ways to avoid medical tests that would reveal his deception. The irony was bitter. All those months of carefully timing intercourse, tracking ovulation, taking supplements, avoiding alcohol, all of it had been meaningless. Michael had been going through the motions, pretending to try while knowing it was impossible. He'd even bought me expensive ovulation predictor kits for Christmas one year, a gift I thought was thoughtful and supportive. I pulled out my phone and called David. We needed to talk, and I couldn't put it off any longer. If he was the father of my child, I needed to know how it happened. The conversation was going to be difficult, but avoiding it wouldn't make the truth disappear. Sarah, is everything okay? You sound upset. David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you remember the night about 6 months ago when you came to check on me? When Michael was working late and we both had too much wine? There was a long pause. Yes, I remember. Why? I need to know what happened that night. I remember drinking too much, and I remember you helping me, but some details are fuzzy. I woke up on the couch the next morning, and you were gone. Another pause, longer this time. Sarah, where is this coming from? Did something happen? Is the baby okay? His concern for the baby struck me as significant. David, I'm going to ask you directly, and I need you to tell me the truth. Are you the father of my baby? The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear David's breathing, could almost feel his struggle with how to respond. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah, I think we need to talk in person. This isn't a conversation for the phone. It's not an answer. David, I know it's not, but please, can we meet somewhere? There are things you need to know, things I should have told you months ago. My heart was racing. His non-denial was as good as a confession. Meet me at the coffee shop on Main Street in an hour. And David, bring any evidence you have. I'm tired of lies and half-truths. I hung up and sat in my car, processing what I'd just learned. David was going to confirm what I already suspected. He was the father of my baby. But how had it happened? Had I somehow consented in my intoxicated state? Had he taken advantage of me? The questions were terrifying because they would determine how I felt about him, about the baby, about everything. The drive to the coffee shop felt like the longest hour of my life. I was about to learn the final piece of the puzzle, the truth, about how I'd gotten pregnant despite my husband's secret vasectomy. But I wasn't sure I was ready for the answer, especially if it meant discovering that both brothers had betrayed me in different ways. As I pulled into the coffee shop parking lot, I saw David's car already there. He was sitting inside, looking nervous and guilty. The conversation we were about to have would change everything, and there would be no going back once the truth was finally revealed. David was waiting at a corner table when I arrived, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup he clearly hadn't touched. He looked up as I approached, his face pale and drawn. I'd known David for 8 years, had always considered him a friend as well as a brother-in-law. Now I was looking at him as a potential father of my child, and everything felt different. Sarah, I'm so sorry, he said before I even sat down. I've been carrying this guilt for months, and I didn't know how to tell you. I sat across from him, my hands folded protectively over my belly. Tell me what, David? What exactly are you sorry for? He took a shaky breath. That night 6 months ago, you were so upset about not getting pregnant. You'd been trying for so long, and you felt like a failure. Michael was working late again, and you were drinking alone, which you never do. When I stopped by and saw how devastated you were, I just wanted to help. Help how? You were crying, talking about how you felt broken, how you thought you'd never be a mother. You said Michael seemed distant lately, like he was losing interest in starting a family. You felt like you were disappointing him. I remembered fragments of that conversation, the raw vulnerability I'd felt, the loneliness of carrying all that pain alone. Go on. You asked me if I thought you were defective, if there was something wrong with you that made you unable to have children. I told you there was nothing wrong with you, that you were perfect. And then you asked me something that I should have said no to. But I was drunk too, and I'd been watching you suffer for so long. My heart was pounding. What did I ask you? David looked down at his hands. You asked if I would help you get pregnant. You said if Michael couldn't give you a baby, maybe I could. You said it would be our secret, just that one time, so you could finally be a mother. The words hit me like a physical blow. I had asked him. In my desperate, intoxicated state, I had propositioned my brother-in-law. The shame was overwhelming, but also confusing. And you said yes. I should have said no. I should have made you coffee and called someone to stay with you. But Sarah, I've had feelings for you for years. I've watched Michael take you for granted, watched him prioritize work over your happiness. When you asked me to help you have the baby you wanted so desperately, I convinced myself I was doing something good. I felt sick, so we did have sex that night. Yes, you were emotional and vulnerable, and I took advantage of that. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't resist the chance to be with you, to give you what you wanted. I told myself it was just one time, that it would help you, that no one would ever know. The reality of what he was telling me was sinking in. I had consciously asked David to help me get pregnant, and he had agreed. It was an assault. It was a drunken decision that had consequences neither of us had fully considered. But it was also a massive violation of trust and family bonds. Did you know about Michael's vasectomy? David's face went white. What vasectomy? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of the receipt. Michael had a vasectomy 3 years ago. He's been lying to me this entire time, pretending to try for a baby while knowing it was impossible. David stared at the receipt in shock. I had no idea. Sarah, I swear I didn't know. I thought you were just having trouble conceiving naturally. So when I got pregnant, you knew you were the father. I suspected, but I hoped maybe it was Michael's. I wanted to believe that somehow you'd gotten pregnant with your husband, that our night together hadn't created this situation. But as the months went by, I became more certain. I pulled out a paternity test kit I'd bought that morning. I need to be absolutely sure. Will you take this test? David nodded without hesitation. Yes, of course. Sarah, I want you to know that I never intended for this to happen. I was drunk and stupid and selfish. I've regretted it every day since. But you didn't regret it enough to tell me the truth. I was terrified. I knew it would destroy your marriage, our family, everything. I convinced myself that if I just stayed quiet, maybe you'd never have to know. Michael seemed happy about the pregnancy, and I thought maybe we could all just move forward. Michael isn't happy about the pregnancy, David. He's been having an affair for over a year. He's planning to use my pregnancy as evidence of infidelity to divorce me and take everything. He's been setting me up this whole time. David's face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, disgust. That bastard. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he was capable of that level of deception. Neither did I, so now I'm carrying your baby, my marriage is over, and my husband is planning to destroy my life. How exactly did you think this was? Going to work out? David reached across the table, but I pulled my hands away. I don't know. I was hoping somehow it would all work out, that the baby would bring you joy regardless of who the father was. I was prepared to be Uncle David for the rest of my life and never tell anyone the truth. And what about your feelings for me? Were you just going to watch me raise your child with your brother? I was going to try. I love you, Sarah, but I know I don't deserve you. What I did was wrong, and I've been living with the guilt ever since. But I also love this baby already, and I want to be involved in their life if you'll let me. I looked at this man who had been part of my life for 8 years, who had helped create the child I was carrying, who had kept this secret while watching me struggle with questions about my pregnancy. The situation was impossibly complicated, but at least David was being honest now. Unlike Michael, he seemed genuinely remorseful and willing to face the consequences of his actions. "We need to take this paternity test," I said. "And then we need to figure out how to deal with Michael. Because once he realizes you're the father, he's going to use this against both of us." David nodded solemnly. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect you and the baby. I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'll spend the rest of my life making this right." As we left the coffee shop to go take the paternity test, I realized my life had become something I never could have imagined. I was carrying my brother-in-law's child. My husband was planning to destroy me, and I was about to become a single mother in the most complicated family situation possible. But at least now I knew the truth, and the truth, however painful, was better than living a lie. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with our family calendar spread out before me, marking every instance of David's visits over the past year. The pattern was disturbing. He had been coming by regular when Michael was working late or traveling, always with some excuse, dropping off something for Michael, checking on me, fixing something around the house. I'd always thought David was just being a good brother-in-law, but now I wondered if his visits were motivated by his feelings for me. Had he been waiting for an opportunity like that night 6 months ago? Had he been hoping I'd turn to him for comfort? Looking at the calendar, I could see that David's visits had increased significantly in the months before I got pregnant. He'd come by at least twice a week, sometimes more. Michael had been working late more frequently, traveling more for business. I'd been lonely and frustrated, exactly the emotional state that would make me vulnerable to David's attention. The night I got pregnant wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of months of David, positioning himself as my emotional support while Michael was absent. I've been grateful for his presence, his willingness to listen to my concerns about fertility, his sympathy for my situation. Now, I wondered if his sympathy had been calculated. I found the notebook where I'd been tracking my ovulation cycles. Another painful reminder of how desperately I'd wanted to get pregnant. According to my records, the night with David had been during my most fertile period. Had that been coincidence, or had David been paying attention to my cycle tracking? The thought made me nauseous. My phone buzzed with a text from David. I dropped off the paternity test at the lab. Results should be back in 3 to 5 days. I've been thinking about what you said about Michael's plan. We need to talk strategy. The word strategy bothered me. Everyone in my life seemed to be playing chess while I was playing checkers. Michael had his divorce strategy. David wanted to discuss strategy, and I felt like I was constantly one step behind everyone else's plans. I texted back, "Not tonight." I need time to process everything. But David responded immediately, "Sarah, I know this is overwhelming, but we can't wait. If Michael is planning something, we need to be prepared. I love you, and I love our baby. Let me help." The possessive language bothered me. Our baby. As if we were a couple, as if we had a relationship beyond one drunken night that I barely remembered. David seemed to be projecting a romantic narrative onto what had happened between us, and I wasn't ready for that interpretation. I turned off my phone and went upstairs to what was supposed to be the nursery. Michael and I had started planning this room months ago, picking out paint colors and furniture. Now everything felt tainted by the knowledge of his deception. He'd helped me plan a nursery for a baby he knew wasn't his, all while plotting to use that same baby as evidence against me. I sat in the rocking chair we'd bought, placing my hands on my belly. The baby was active tonight, moving frequently. Did babies somehow sense their mother's stress? I found myself talking to my unborn child for the first time. "I'm sorry this is so complicated," I whispered. "I'm sorry your father isn't who I thought he was, and I'm sorry I don't know how to fix this mess. But I promise I'll protect you. no matter what happens. The baby kicked in response, a strong movement that made me smile despite everything. Whatever the circumstances of conception, this child was innocent. They deserved love and stability, not the chaos that surrounded their existence. I thought about my own childhood, how stable and loving my parents had been. They'd been married 40 years when my father died, had weathered every storm together. I'd wanted that kind of marriage, that kind of family stability for my children. Instead, I was facing single motherhood with a child whose conception would be a family scandal. My parents lived in Florida now, retired and enjoying their golden years. How was I going to explain this situation to them? How could I tell them that their son-in-law had deceived me for years, that I'd gotten pregnant by his brother, that their grandchild was the product of one night of drunken desperation? The shame was overwhelming. I'd always been the responsible one, the good daughter, who made smart choices and lived a stable life. Now I felt like I'd become someone I didn't recognize, a woman who'd gotten drunk and slept with her brother-in-law, who'd been so naive she didn't realize her husband was planning to destroy her. I picked up my phone and called my sister Emma in California. We'd always been close, and I needed to tell someone the truth before I lost my courage. "Sarah, how are you feeling? How's the pregnancy going?" "Emma, I need to tell you something, and it's going to sound impossible." I told her everything: Michael's vasectomy, his affair, David's confession, the paternity test. Emma listened without interrupting, occasionally gasping or muttering words of disbelief. "Oh my God, Sarah, this is like something out of a soap opera. I can't believe Michael would do this to you. I can't believe any of it. 6 months ago, I thought I had a stable marriage and was finally going to be a mother. Now I'm facing divorce and single parenthood with a baby whose father is my brother-in-law. What are you going to do? I don't know. David wants to help, but I don't trust his motives. Michael is planning to blindside me with divorce papers and use my pregnancy against me. I feel like I'm surrounded by men who've been manipulating me. You need a lawyer, Sarah, a good one. And you need to start protecting yourself financially. Don't wait for Michael to make his move." Emma was right. I'd been so focused on understanding what had happened that I hadn't started planning for what came next. I needed to stop being reactive and start taking control of my situation. "There's something else," I told Emma. "I keep thinking about that night with David, trying to remember exactly what happened. I asked him to help me get pregnant, but I was so drunk. Did I really consent, or did he take advantage of me? Honey, that's a question only you can answer. But the fact that you were drunk and emotional doesn't make it okay. David should have said no, regardless of what you asked for." After we hung up, I felt slightly better having told someone the truth. Emma was right. I needed to stop being a victim and start being strategic. If Michael and David could make plans, so could I. I made a list of everything I needed to do: find a divorce, attorney, secure my finances, document Michael's affair, prepare for the paternity test results. I also needed to decide what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted with David going forward. The baby kicked again, and I realized that whatever happened between the adults, this child would need stability. That meant I had to stop focusing on how I'd been wronged and start focusing on how to build a good life for both of us. The truth was finally coming to light, but the real work was just beginning. 3 days later, the call came while I was shelving books at the library. The lab technician was professional and direct. "Mrs. Matthews, the paternity test results are ready. Would you like me to read them to you, or would you prefer to pick up a copy? Please read them to me. The probability of paternity for David Matthews is 99.97%. He is the biological father of your unborn child." I thanked her and hung up, leaning against the biography section for support. Even though I'd known this was coming, hearing the scientific confirmation was devastating. David was the father of my baby. The child I was carrying was the product of one night of alcohol-fueled desperation, not the loving marriage I thought I had. I called David immediately. The results are in. You're the father. There was a pause, then a shaky breath. How do you feel about that? I don't know. Confused, scared, angry at everyone, including myself. Sarah, I know this is complicated, but I want you to know that I'm committed to being a good father. I wanted to support you and the baby however I can. What does that mean? Exactly. Are you planning to leave your job and move to be near us? Are you expecting us to play house together? Are you going to tell people you're the father? I haven't thought through all the details yet. I just know I want to be involved. David, you need to understand something. Just because you're the biological father doesn't mean you get to make decisions about my life or this baby's life. You helped create this situation, but I'm the one who has to live with the consequences. I understand that. I'm not trying to control anything. I just want to help. I ended the call feeling frustrated. David seemed to think that confirming his paternity would somehow make everything simpler, but it actually made everything more complicated. Now I had to figure out how to co-parent with a man I barely trusted, while dealing with a husband who was actively plotting against me. That evening, Michael came home with flowers and takeout from my favorite restaurant. I thought we should have a nice dinner together, he said, kissing my cheek. How are you feeling? How's our little one? The casual way he referred to our little one made my skin crawl. He knew the baby wasn't his, but he was still playing the role of excited father. I wondered what his endgame was. When was he planning to reveal his knowledge? When would he spring his trap? I'm fine. The baby's fine. Everything's completely normal. I put emphasis on the word normal, watching for his reaction. Michael smiled, but I caught something in his eyes, a flicker of calculation. That's wonderful. I've been thinking we should start interviewing pediatricians soon. Maybe tour the hospital where you'll deliver. Of course. We want to be prepared for our miracle baby. Again, I watched his face. This time, he definitely flinched at the word miracle. He knew exactly how miraculous this pregnancy was, given his vasectomy. During dinner, Michael was unusually attentive, asking about my day at the library, discussing baby names, talking about his excitement about becoming a father. The performance was Oscar-worthy, but I could see through it now. He was establishing a record of being the loving, supportive husband, probably in case he needed character witnesses for the divorce proceedings. I've been thinking, Michael said as we finished eating. Maybe we should have a paternity test done, just for our peace of mind, you know? With all the fertility struggles we had, I want to make sure everything is okay. There it was. The trap was being set. Michael was going to suggest the paternity test himself, playing the role of the concerned husband who just wants to ensure his child's health. When the results showed he wasn't the father, he'd act shocked and betrayed. It was a brilliant strategy, and if I hadn't already known the truth, I would have walked right into it. A paternity test? Why would we need that? Just standard procedure these days. Lots of couples do it, especially when there have been fertility issues. I want to make sure our insurance will cover everything properly. I pretended to consider it. I suppose that makes sense. When were you thinking? Soon. Maybe next week? I can call the doctor tomorrow and set it up. Actually, Michael, I already had one done. The color drained from his face. You did? When? Why? Because I found your vasectomy receipt. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael's carefully constructed mask slipped completely, revealing the calculating stranger underneath. He stared at me for a long moment, clearly trying to figure out how much I knew and how to respond. Sarah, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain why you had a vasectomy 3 years ago and never told me? Can you explain why you let me think I was failing to get pregnant when you knew it was impossible. Can you explain why you're having an affair with Jennifer while planning to use my pregnancy to destroy me in divorce court? Michael's face went through a range of emotions: surprise, fear, anger, and finally a cold resignation. The loving husband act was over. How long have you known? Long enough to get a lawyer and protect myself. Long enough to get the paternity test results. Long enough to know that you're not the father of this baby. Then who is? I looked at him steadily. That's none of your business anymore. You gave up the right to know when you decided to lie to me for 3 years. Michael pushed back from the table, his face hard. You cheated on me, Sarah. You're carrying another man's child. Do you really think you have the moral high ground here? I think a woman who was desperate to have a child with her husband, who was being systematically lied to and manipulated, who turned to someone else in a moment of vulnerability, is very different from a man who planned and executed an elaborate deception while having an affair. The courts might see it differently. We'll see about that. I have evidence of your vasectomy, your affair, your secret phone, your hidden bank account, and your divorce strategy folder. How do you think that's going to play with a judge? For the first time since I'd known him, Michael looked genuinely afraid. His carefully laid plans were crumbling, and he was realizing that I wasn't the naive victim he'd thought I was. Sarah, maybe we can work this out. Maybe we don't need to go through a messy divorce. We could figure out a way to make this work. No, Michael, we're done. Pack your things and get out. My lawyer will be in touch. As I watched my husband of 8 years pack his belongings and leave our house, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. The marriage was over, but at least the lies were finally in the open. Now I had to figure out how to move forward as a single mother, co-parenting with David while protecting my child from the chaos that had brought them into existence. The next morning, I met with Rebecca Chen, the divorce attorney Emma had recommended. Her office was in downtown Cleveland, a sleek space that projected competence and success. Rebecca was about my age, sharply dressed, with the kind of confidence I wished I possessed. Mrs. Matthews, I've reviewed the documents you sent over. Your husband's deception is extensive, but the good news is that Ohio is an equitable distribution state. His vasectomy, combined with evidence of his affair and hidden assets, puts you in a strong position. I sat across from her, a legal pad, full of notes in my lap. What about the fact that I'm pregnant with another man's child? That complicates things, but it doesn't negate his misconduct. The key is establishing that your pregnancy occurred because of his deception about the vasectomy. You were trying to have children with your husband and only turned to someone else when you were emotionally vulnerable due to his lies. His affair started before I got pregnant, even better. We can argue that his emotional unavailability and deception created the circumstances that led to your pregnancy. You weren't having an affair, you were the victim of systematic manipulation. Rebecca walked me through the legal strategy. We would file for divorce citing adultery and gross neglect of duty. We would seek equitable distribution of assets, including recovery of the money Michael had hidden. We would also seek spousal support, given my lower income as a librarian. What about custody of the baby? Since your husband isn't the biological father, he has no parental rights. However, the biological father will have rights and responsibilities. You mentioned it's his brother? Yes, David Matthews. Rebecca made notes. That's unusual, but not unheard of. The court will be primarily concerned with the best interests of the child. If David wants to be involved, he'll need to establish paternity legally and potentially pay child support. I'm not sure I want his financial support. You might not have a choice. Child support is considered the right of the child, not the parent. If David is the father and has the means to support the child, the court may order it regardless of your preferences. After the meeting, I felt both empowered and overwhelmed. The legal process was going to be complicated, but at least I had an advocate who understood the situation. Rebecca had given me a list of steps to take: document everything, secure important papers, open my own bank account, and begin gathering evidence of Michael's misconduct. I drove to the bank where Michael and I had our joint accounts. I checked online that morning and seen that he'd transferred another large sum to his secret account. Rebecca had warned me this might happen and advised me to withdraw half of our remaining joint funds to protect myself. The bank manager was sympathetic. When I explained I was going through a divorce, she helped me open individual accounts and transfer funds. "I'm sorry you're going through this," she said. "Unfortunately, we see this kind of financial manipulation quite often in divorce cases." That afternoon, I had an unexpected visitor. Michael's mother, Patricia, showed up at my door with a casserole and a concerned expression. We always had a good relationship, and I felt sick knowing that was about to change. "Sarah, dear, Michael told me you two are having some problems. I wanted to check on you and the baby." I invited her in, wondering what version of events Michael had shared with his family. "What did Michael tell you?" "He said you've been stressed about the pregnancy, that you've been making some accusations about him that aren't true. He's very worried about you." So Michael was already controlling the narrative, painting me as the unstable wife making false accusations. I had to decide whether to tell Patricia the truth or let Michael's version stand until the legal proceedings began. "Patricia, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be difficult to hear." I showed her the vasectomy receipt and explained about Michael's affair. I watched her face change as she processed the information, saw her go through the same shock and disbelief I'd experienced. "This can't be right. Michael wouldn't do this." "I have more evidence: his secret phone, bank statements, hotel receipts." "I'm sorry, but your son has been lying to all of us." Patricia sat in silence for a long time, staring at the receipt. Finally, she looked up with tears in her eyes. "If this is true, then whose baby are you carrying?" "David's." The shock on her face was complete. "David? My David? How is that possible?" I explained the circumstances as gently as I could, watching Patricia struggle to understand how both her sons had betrayed me in different ways. Her world was being turned upside down just as mine had been. "I don't know what to say, Sarah. I raised those boys to be better than this. I know you did. This isn't your fault, Patricia. But I wanted you to hear the truth from me before Michael starts telling his version of events." Patricia left shortly after, taking her casserole and her shattered image of her sons with her. I felt terrible for her, but I knew she needed to understand the reality of the situation before choosing sides. That evening, David called. "Mom just left my apartment. She's devastated. She told me you showed her the receipt and told her about the baby. She deserved to know the truth." "I agree. Sarah, I've been thinking about what you said about wanting to make decisions for yourself and the baby. I want you to know that I'll respect whatever boundaries you set. I just want to be a good father, however that looks." "I appreciate that, David. But right now, I need to focus on getting through the divorce and preparing for single motherhood. Everything else is secondary. I understand. But I want you to know that I'm here when you're ready. I love you, Sarah, and I love our baby. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm hoping someday you might be willing to consider building something real with me." His confession caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the practical aspects of the situation that I hadn't thought about the emotional possibilities. Did I have feelings for David? Could we build a relationship based on more than guilt and obligation? "David, I can't think about that right now. My marriage just ended. I'm about to be a single mother, and I'm trying to rebuild my entire life. Romance is the last thing on my mind." "I know. I just wanted you to know how I feel, so you understand that my offer to help isn't just about obligation, it's about love." After we hung up, I sat in my empty house, processing everything that had happened. In less than a week, I'd gone from being a married woman expecting her husband's child to being a soon-to-be divorced woman carrying her brother-in-law's baby. The truth was finally out, but the real challenges were just beginning. I had to navigate a complex legal battle, prepare for motherhood, and figure out what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted with David going forward. The baby kicked strongly, reminding me that whatever happened between the adults, there was an innocent life depending on me to make good decisions. That responsibility was both terrifying and motivating. I had to be stronger than I'd ever been before, not just for myself, but for the child who would soon depend on me for everything. Over the next few days, I systematically gathered evidence of Michael's deception with the methodical precision of a librarian conducting research. Rebecca had emphasized the importance of documentation, and I was determined to build an airtight case. I started by making copies of everything in Michael's hidden safe, including the divorce strategy folder and bank statements. The depth of his planning was staggering. He'd been preparing for this divorce for over a year, carefully moving assets and building his case against me. One document particularly stood out, a timeline he'd created showing my behavior over the past 3 years with notes about my increasingly desperate desire for children and my emotional instability. He'd been documenting my vulnerability, turning my grief over our fertility struggles into evidence of mental instability. The clinical way he'd cataloged my pain was breathtaking in its cruelty. He'd noted the days I cried, the times I suggested fertility treatments, even my purchase of pregnancy books as evidence of my obsession with having children. I photographed Michael's second phone and all the messages between him and Jennifer. Their affair had been more extensive than I'd initially realized. They'd been planning a future together, discussing everything from moving in together to her meeting his parents. In one particularly damning exchange, Jennifer had written, "I can't wait until you're free of Sarah and we can start our real life together." The hotel receipts told their own story. Michael and Jennifer had been meeting regularly for over a year, always on the same day of the week, always at the same hotel. They had a routine, ritual of betrayal that had become as scheduled as any other part of their lives, but the most valuable evidence came from an unexpected source. While going through Michael's laptop, I found a folder labeled Personal that contained a voice recording app. He'd been recording our conversations for months, apparently planning to use them as evidence of my emotional state. What he didn't realize was that he'd also recorded several phone calls with Jennifer and conversations with his divorce attorney, Dot, in one recorded call with his lawyer. Michael discussed his strategy explicitly. The pregnancy is perfect because it proves she cheated. I can use her desperation for children to show she was unstable and unfaithful. Combined with my evidence of her emotional problems, I should be able to get out of this marriage with minimal financial loss. His lawyer had advised him to be careful about timing. Don't reveal what you know about the pregnancy until after she's given birth. Let her get attached to the child. Let her think everything is normal. That way, when you present the paternity evidence, it'll be more devastating and she'll be less likely to fight the settlement. Listening to that conversation, I understood just how calculated Michael's cruelty was. He was planning to let me go through the entire pregnancy, believing he was the father. Let me name him on the birth certificate. Let me bond with our child. Together all so he could inflict maximum emotional damage when he revealed the truth. I also found emails between Michael and a private investigator he'd hired to follow me. The PI had been documenting my activities for months, looking for evidence of an affair. Ironically, he'd been watching me on the wrong nights. He'd missed my evening with David, entirely because it had been spontaneous and David's visit had appeared innocent from the outside. The private investigator's reports painted a picture of a woman living a quiet, routine life. He'd followed me to the library, the grocery store, doctor's appointments, visits with friends. His conclusion was that if I was having an affair, I was extremely discreet about it. Michael had been frustrated by these reports, according to the email chain, because he'd been hoping for clear evidence of infidelity. I printed everything and organized it into folders for Rebecca. The evidence was overwhelming. Michael had orchestrated an elaborate deception while planning to destroy my life. But having the evidence and knowing how to use it strategically were different things. I decided I needed to record a conversation. With Michael myself, I bought a small digital recorder and waited for an opportunity. It came when Michael called to discuss working things out. "Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation the other night. Maybe I was too hasty in leaving. Maybe we can find a way to make this work." I started the recorder. "What are you suggesting, Michael? I'm willing to overlook your ... indiscretion. If you're willing to work on our marriage. I know you were emotional and vulnerable, and people make mistakes when they're desperate. You're willing to overlook my pregnancy with another man's child. It won't be easy, but I love you. I'm willing to raise the child as my own if you can commit to being faithful going forward." The magnanimous tone was sickening, but I played along. "That's very generous of you. What would you need from me?" "I'd need you to cut off all contact with whoever the father is. I'd need you to agree to counseling, and I'd need you to sign a postnuptial agreement that protects both of us financially." "What kind of financial protection?" "Just standard stuff. Making sure that if either of us strays again, the injured party is protected. Nothing unreasonable." I could hear the trap being set. The postnuptial agreement would probably give Michael even more protection than divorce would, while binding me to a marriage with a man who despised me. It was a brilliant backup plan in case his original divorce strategy failed. I'd have to think about it, Michael. This is a lot to process, of course. But Sarah, I want you to understand that this is probably your best option. Being a single mother is difficult, and your reputation in town, ... well, people talk. Staying married gives you and the baby stability and respectability. The veiled threat was clear. If I didn't accept his generous offer to forgive my infidelity, he'd make sure everyone in our small town knew I'd cheated on my husband and gotten pregnant by another man. In a place like ours, that kind of scandal could affect everything, from my job to my social relationships. I understand, Michael. Let me think about it and get back to you. After I hung up and stopped the recording, I felt sick. Michael's offer was designed to trap me in a marriage where he held all the power. He'd have evidence of my admission of infidelity, legal protection through the postnuptial agreement, and the ongoing ability to hold my betrayal over my head forever. But he'd also given me exactly what I needed, a recorded confession of his awareness that the baby wasn't his, combined with his strategic thinking about how to use the situation to his advantage. Rebecca would know how to use this evidence to destroy his carefully constructed victim narrative. I called her immediately. "I have more evidence, and I think we need to move faster than we planned." "What kind of evidence?" "A recording of Michael, admitting he knows the baby isn't his, and outlining his strategy to manipulate me into staying in the marriage, plus extensive documentation of his affair and his plans to use my pregnancy against me. Bring everything to my office tomorrow morning. If what you're telling me is accurate, we might be able to end this quickly and decisively." As I hung up, I felt a surge of power I hadn't experienced in months. For the first time since finding that vasectomy receipt, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. Michael had been so focused on manipulating me that he'd gotten careless with his evidence. His own recordings and documents were going to be the weapons that destroyed his case. The baby kicked strongly, as if celebrating with me. Soon, I would be free of Michael's lies and manipulation. The road ahead would still be challenging, but at least I'd be walking it on my own terms. Rebecca reviewed all my evidence and agreed we should move quickly. Your husband is clearly planning something, and we can't let him control the timeline. We're filing today. That afternoon, Michael was served with divorce papers at his office. I knew because Jennifer called his secret phone, which I still had in my possession, leaving a frantic voicemail about men in suits showing up and Michael looking devastated. Michael arrived at the house that evening, his face a mask of controlled. Right. I was ready for him, having placed my recording device in my pocket and positioned myself near the door in case I needed to leave quickly. You couldn't wait to discuss things like adults, he said, throwing the divorce papers on the coffee table. You had to humiliate me at work? I thought about your offer, Michael. I decided I wasn't interested in being blackmailed into staying, married to a man who's been planning my destruction for over a year. What are you talking about? I pulled out a printed copy of his divorce strategy folder and placed it next to the papers. I found your plans, Michael. All of them. The hidden accounts, the private investigator, the recordings you made of our conversations. I know exactly what you were planning to do to me. Michael's face went white as he recognized his own documents. You went through my personal belongings? You mean the belongings you hid in a secret safe in our house? The house that's half mine? The safe that contained evidence of your systematic deception of your wife? Those documents are private. You can't use them in court. Actually, I can. They were in our marital home, and they document marital misconduct. My lawyer was very clear about that. Michael sat down heavily, his confident facade crumbling. Sarah, you don't understand the full situation. There are things you don't know. Like what? Like your year-long affair with Jennifer? Like your secret vasectomy? Like your plan to let me go through the entire pregnancy thinking you were the father, then use the baby as evidence against me? What exactly don't I understand? You don't understand why I did it. Enlighten me. Michael was quiet for a long moment, then looked up with something approaching honesty for the first time in years. I fell out of love with you, Sarah. Not suddenly. Not because of anything you did, but gradually. And I was too much of a coward to just tell you and ask for a divorce. So you decided to destroy me instead. I decided to protect myself. Do you know what divorce would have cost me if I just asked for one? Half of everything I've worked for, alimony payments for years. I couldn't afford to just walk away. So you got a vasectomy to make sure I couldn't trap you with a pregnancy? Yes, and then I met Jennifer and I realized what I'd been missing. She made me feel alive again, made me remember who I was before I got married and settled down. The casual cruelty of his words was staggering. So you decided to have your affair while making me think I was failing as a wife because I couldn't get pregnant. I never meant for you to suffer. I thought we'd just drift apart naturally. I thought you'd eventually want to leave too. Instead, I got desperate enough to sleep with your brother. Michael's face darkened. Yes, you did. You cheated on me, Sarah. Whatever I did, you still betrayed our marriage vows. I betrayed our marriage vows. You got a secret vasectomy and started an affair, but I'm the one who betrayed our marriage. You slept with my brother. I slept with someone who showed me kindness when my husband was emotionally absent and physically unavailable. I slept with someone when I was drunk and desperate because my marriage was falling apart and I didn't understand why. Michael stood up, his anger building. Don't try to make yourself the victim here. You made a choice to cheat, and you made a choice to systematically lie to me for 3 years while planning to destroy my life. Which one of us is the real villain here, Michael? I never planned to destroy your life. I just wanted out of our marriage. I pulled out my phone and played the recording of his conversation with his lawyer about letting me get attached to the baby so the revelation would be more devastating. Michael's face went ashen as he heard his own voice describing his strategy. You recorded me? You recorded me first. Turnabout is fair play. That's illegal. You can't record someone without their consent. Actually, in Ohio, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. I consented to recording my own conversation with you, just like you consented to recording your conversations with me. Michael slumped back in his chair, finally understanding that his carefully laid plans had backfired completely. What do you want, Sarah? I want an equitable division of our assets. I want you to return the money you've been hiding in secret accounts. I want you to admit to your affair and your deception, and I want you to sign away any claims to this baby. The baby isn't mine anyway. No, but you were planning to use the pregnancy against me. I want legal assurance that you'll have no involvement in this child's life. Michael was quiet for a long time, processing the reality of his situation. Finally, he looked up with something that might have been respect. You're not the woman I married. No, I'm not. The woman you married was naive enough to trust you. The woman you're divorcing knows exactly who you are. If I agree to your terms, will you keep the details private? Will you not tell people about Jennifer and the vasectomy? I'll keep it as private as possible, but I won't lie if people ask direct questions. Your reputation is not my responsibility anymore, Michael. And David? What happens with him? That's between David and me. It has nothing to do with you. Michael nodded slowly, finally understanding that he'd lost control of the situation completely. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. We'll work out the details. There's one more thing. Michael, I want a written confession. I want you to admit in writing that you had a vasectomy, that you knew the baby couldn't be yours, and that you were planning to use my pregnancy against me. I want legal documentation of your deception. Why? Because I never want to go through anything like this again. I want proof of what you did. So if you ever try to rewrite history or make me look like the villain, I'll have evidence of the truth. Michael stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. You'll have your confession. As he left the house that night, I felt a mixture of triumph and sadness. The marriage was truly over, but at least it was ending on my terms. Michael's elaborate plans had crumbled, and I was going to emerge from the divorce with my dignity and financial security intact. But the confrontation had also clarified something important. Michael hadn't loved me for years. Our entire relationship had been a lie, not just the part about the vasectomy. I'd been grieving the loss of a marriage that had already been dead, mourning a love that had been one-sided for longer than I'd realized. The truth was painful, but liberating. I could stop trying to save something that couldn't be saved and focus on building something new for myself and my baby. The real challenge wasn't ending my marriage to Michael, it was figuring out how to begin whatever came next. 3 days after my confrontation with Michael, David asked to meet me for coffee. He looked nervous when I arrived, fidgeting with a small notebook that I noticed was worn from frequent handling. I heard Michael was served with divorce papers, he said as I sat down. News travels fast in a small town. Sarah, I need to show you something. I've been carrying this around for months, not knowing what to do with it. He slid the notebook across the table to me. It's a journal I've been keeping since that night. I wrote down everything I remembered, everything I felt, all the guilt and confusion. I opened the journal reluctantly, not sure I wanted to read David's private thoughts about our encounter. The entries were dated, starting from the day after our night together. Day 1, I can't believe what happened last night. Sarah was so broken, so desperate for the child Michael has been denying her without her knowledge. When she asked me to help her get pregnant, I should have said no. I should have made her coffee and called someone to stay with her. Instead, I told myself I was helping her, that I was giving her what she needed. But I know the truth. I've wanted her for years. And I took advantage of her vulnerability. Day 15. Sarah told Michael she's pregnant today. I watched him pretend to be excited, knowing what I know about his vasectomy. Yes, I've known about the procedure for over a year. Michael told me when he was recovering, swore me to secrecy. He said he wasn't ready for children, but didn't want to hurt Sarah by telling her. I was disgusted by his deception even then, but I never imagined it would lead to this. I looked up at David in shock. You knew about Michael's vasectomy before we slept together? Yes. I found out when he had complications from the surgery and needed someone to drive him to a follow-up appointment. He made me promise not to tell you. So when I asked you to help me get pregnant, you knew Michael couldn't be the father? David's face was full of shame. Yes, I knew that if you got pregnant, it would have to be with someone else. I knew Michael was lying to you about trying for a baby. I should have told you the truth about his vasectomy instead of taking advantage of your desperation. I continued reading, my anger building with each entry. Day 30. Sarah is glowing with happiness about the pregnancy. Michael is playing his part perfectly, acting like the excited father-to-be. I want to tell her the truth about everything, but I'm terrified of losing her forever. If she knew I was aware of Michael's deception when we slept together, she'd never forgive me. Day 45. I've been visiting more often, telling myself I'm checking on Sarah and the baby, but I know I'm really hoping for signs that she has feelings for me. Sometimes I catch her looking at me strangely, like she's trying to remember something. I wonder if part of her knows the truth. Day 60. Michael asked me today if I think Sarah seems different lately. He's suspicious about the pregnancy, knows it shouldn't be possible. I played dumb, but I could see him calculating, wondering if his wife had been unfaithful. I realized he's going to figure out the timeline eventually. You've been lying to me this whole time, I said, closing the journal. You let me think that night was spontaneous, that you were just being kind to a desperate woman, but you knew exactly what you were doing. Sarah, I was trying to protect you, protect me. You were protecting yourself. You knew Michael had lied to me. You knew he was having an affair, and instead of telling me the truth, you used my vulnerability to sleep with me. You're right. I was selfish and manipulative, but Sarah, my feelings for you are real. I've loved you since the day Michael brought you home to meet the family. For 8 years, you've been in love with your brother's wife for 8 years and never said anything. What could I say? You were happy with Michael, or I thought you were. I watched him take you for granted, watched him prioritize everything else over your happiness, but you seemed committed to making the marriage work. I thought back over the years, remembering David's presence at family gatherings, his attentiveness to me, his willingness to help with household projects when Michael was busy. I thought he was just being a good brother-in-law, but now I wondered if there had been signs I'd missed. The night we slept together, I said. How much of what I said do you remember? David looked down at his hands. You said you felt like a failure as a woman because you couldn't give Michael children. You said you thought there was something wrong with you that made you unworthy of motherhood. You asked if I thought you were broken. And what did you say? I told you that you were perfect, that any man would be lucky to have you as the mother of his children. I told you that Michael was an idiot if he couldn't see how incredible you were. And then you asked if I would help you have a baby. You said if Michael couldn't give you children, maybe I could. You said it would be our secret just one time so you could finally be a mother. I remembered fragments of that conversation. Now remembered the wine and the emotional desperation that had driven me to make such a request. But knowing that David had been aware of Michael's vasectomy changed everything about that night. You could have told me the truth about Michael's surgery. You could have explained that he was the problem, not me. Instead, you let me think I was defective and then offered to fix me by sleeping with me. I know how it looks. It looks like you manipulated a vulnerable woman into having sex with you by withholding information that would have changed her decision-making process. David was quiet for a long moment. You're right, that's exactly what I did. I told myself I was. helping you, but I was really helping myself to something I'd wanted for years. And now, what do you want now? I want to be a good father to our child. I want to support you however I can. And if you'll let me, I want to try to build something real with you, something based on honesty instead of lies. Based on honesty? David, you've been lying to me for months. You've watched me struggle with questions about my pregnancy, watched me wonder how I could have gotten pregnant, all while knowing exactly what happened and why. I was afraid. Afraid you'd hate me. If you knew the whole truth, I do hate you. Right now, I hate you almost as much as I hate Michael. You both used my desire for children against me. You both manipulated me when I was vulnerable. The only difference is that you convinced yourself you were doing it out of love. David's face crumpled. Sarah, please. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you to give me a chance to make this right. I stood up, taking his journal with me. I need time to process this, all of it. I can't make any decisions about our future until I understand the full scope of what both of you have done to me. The journal is yours to keep. I wrote it for you, hoping someday I'd have the courage to show it to you. As I walked to my car, I felt overwhelmed by the depth of deception that had surrounded me. Not only had my husband been systematically lying to me that his brother had been complicit in the deception while harboring secret feelings for me. The pregnancy I thought was a miracle was actually the result of a calculated manipulation by a man who had been in love with me for years. I drove home feeling like I didn't know anyone in my life, including myself. How had I been so blind to the undercurrents around me? How had I missed David's feelings, Michael's deception, the complex web of lies that had shaped my life for years? The baby kicked strongly, reminding me that whatever the circumstances of conception, there was still an innocent life depending on me to make good choices. I had to figure out how to co-parent with David despite my anger, how to protect my child from the toxic dynamics that had brought them into existence. Reading David's journal that night, I realized that while his deception was different from Michael's, it was still a betrayal of trust. He had had multiple opportunities to tell me the truth about Michael's vasectomy, multiple chances to give me the information I needed to make informed decisions about my life. Instead, he'd chosen to serve his own interests while convincing himself he was protecting me. The road ahead was going to be more complicated than I'd imagined, because it wasn't just about ending my marriage to Michael. It was about figuring out how to forgive David enough to build a co-parenting relationship that wouldn't damage our child. 2 weeks later, I sat in Rebecca's office signing the divorce papers. Michael had agreed to all my terms: equitable distribution of assets, return of the hidden funds, a written confession of his deception, and relinquishment of any claims to the baby. His confession was particularly satisfying to read. I, Michael James Matthews, acknowledged that I underwent a vasectomy procedure in March 2022 without informing my wife, Sarah Matthews. I deliberately concealed this information while allowing my wife to believe we were trying to conceive naturally. I was aware that my wife's pregnancy could not be the result of our sexual relationship due to my vasectomy. I had been planning to use this knowledge in divorce proceedings to claim adultery on my wife's part. I acknowledged that my deception was the primary cause of the breakdown of our marriage. He actually signed this. I asked Rebecca, still amazed that Michael had admitted to everything so readily. His lawyer advised him that fighting would be more expensive and potentially more damaging than just agreeing to your terms, especially with all the evidence you gathered. He was facing the possibility of a very public trial where all his manipulations would be exposed. The financial settlement was fair. I would keep the house, my retirement accounts, and half of our joint assets. Michael would keep his business and his retirement funds. There would be no alimony, which was fine with me. I wanted a clean break, no ongoing financial ties that would give him reasons to stay in my life. What about the baby's birth certificate? Rebecca asked. I'll list myself as the mother and leave the father section blank for now. David can establish paternity later if he wants legal rights, but I am not ready to make that decision yet. Driving home from the lawyer's office, I felt an odd mixture of relief and sadness. My marriage was officially over, but I'd also lost the family structure I'd imagined for my child. The baby would grow up knowing their father was their uncle, would have to navigate the complexity of that relationship their entire life. That evening, I had a final conversation with Michael. He came to collect the last of his belongings, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. I'm sorry, Sarah. I know that doesn't mean much now, but I am genuinely sorry for the way I handled everything. Which part are you sorry for? The vasectomy, the affair, the elaborate plan to destroy me, or just getting caught? All of it. I should have just asked for a divorce when I realized I wasn't happy. I should have been honest about my feelings instead of trying to manipulate the situation to my advantage. Why didn't you? Why choose deception and cruelty over honesty? Michael sat down heavily, looking genuinely reflective for the first time in our entire marriage. Because I was a coward. Because I didn't want to be the bad guy who abandoned his wife because he fell out of love. Because I didn't want to lose half my assets and pay alimony. Because I convinced myself that if I could make you want to leave me, it would be easier for everyone. Easier for you, you mean? Yes, easier for me. I know how selfish that sounds, but it's the truth. I thought if I could create a situation where you were the one who had betrayed the marriage, I could walk away with my finances intact and my conscience clear. And you never thought about what that would do to me? I told myself you'd be better off without me eventually, that you'd find someone who could love you the way you deserved. I even thought maybe you and David might end up together someday. He's always been half in love with you. The casual way he mentioned David's feelings confirmed what I'd suspected. The whole family had known about David's attraction to me except me. I'd been the only one operating without complete information. Did you know David was aware of your vasectomy? I suspected he might be. We don't keep many secrets from each other, but I didn't think he'd act on his feelings. He said you told him about the surgery when you had complications. I did. I needed someone to drive me to the follow-up appointment, and I had to explain why. I made him promise not to tell you. So you made your brother complicit in lying to your wife? Michael had the grace to look ashamed. Yes, I involved David in my deception, and I'm sorry for that too. He was trying to protect me by keeping my secret, but it put him in an impossible position. The impossible position led to him sleeping with me. I know. And part of me wonders if I knew that would happen eventually. If maybe I was counting on it happening, so I'd have the evidence I needed for the divorce. The idea that Michael might have unconsciously orchestrated my infidelity was too disturbing to fully process. Had he been manipulating both David and me, knowing that our mutual attraction and my desperation might eventually lead to the very betrayal he needed to justify leaving me? I think you should leave now, Michael. I don't want to hear any more about your psychological motivations. Sarah, for what it's worth, I hope you find happiness. I hope things work out with David, and I hope the baby brings you all the joy you've always wanted. Don't try to be magnanimous now. Don't pretend you care about my happiness when you spent 3 years systematically destroying it. Michael nodded and finished packing his things in silence. When he left that night, I felt like I was finally closing the door on the most toxic period of my life. But later, alone in the house, I broke down completely. The stress of the past month, the betrayal, the anger, the fear about single motherhood, everything hit me at once. I sobbed until I was exhausted, grieving not just for my marriage, but for the naive woman I'd been before I found that vasectomy receipt. The baby seemed to sense my distress. Moving restlessly as I cried, I placed my hands on my belly and tried to send calming thoughts to my unborn child. I'm sorry you're coming into such a complicated situation, I whispered. I'm sorry your parents made such a mess of things before you were even born. But I promise you'll be loved, no matter what happens between the adults. The next morning, I woke up feeling different, not happy exactly, but determined. I was 7 months pregnant, divorced, and facing single motherhood. But I was also free from Michael's deception and manipulation. I had a chance to build something new, something honest, something based on my own choices rather than other people's lives. David called that afternoon. I heard the divorce was finalized. How are you feeling? Relieved, scared, angry, hopeful, all at the same time. Sarah, I know you need time, but I want you to know that I'm committed to being a good father and supporting you, however you'll let me. I've been seeing a therapist to work through my own issues around the deception and manipulation. That's good, David. We're both going to need to be healthier people if we're going to co-parent effectively. Does that mean you're willing to let me be involved? It means I'm willing to consider it. But David, we need to start over completely. No more secrets, no more manipulation, no more assumptions about what I want or need. If you want to be part of this baby's life, you have to earn that privilege through honest, consistent behavior. I understand, and Sarah, I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the man you and our child deserve. As I hung up, I realized that while I couldn't forgive David yet, I could see a path toward working with him for our child's. Saki, the baby deserved to have a father who was present and committed. Even if the relationship between the parents was complicated, was finally ready to stop looking backward at all the deception and betrayal and start looking forward to the life I was going to build for myself and my child. The family meeting was Patricia's idea. She called me a week after the divorce was finalized, her voice strained with exhaustion. Sarah, we need to sit down together, all of us. This situation is tearing the family apart, and I think we need to clear the air before the baby comes. I agreed reluctantly. The meeting was set for Sunday afternoon at Patricia and Robert's house, the same dining room where we'd shared countless holiday meals and family celebrations. Now it felt like we were gathering for a funeral. Everyone was already there when I arrived. Patricia and Robert, Michael's parents, David looking nervous and guilty, Michael, who'd driven down from Cleveland where he was now living with Jennifer, unsurprisingly, my own sister Emma, who'd flown in from California at my request. Patricia had prepared coffee and sandwiches, but no one was eating. The tension in the room was suffocating. I asked everyone here because this family is falling apart, Patricia began, her voice shaking. My sons have both betrayed Sarah in different ways, and now we have a baby coming who's going to grow up in the middle of this mess. We need to figure out how to move forward. Robert, who'd been silent since I arrived, spoke up. Sarah, I want you to know that Patricia and I are ashamed of our son's behavior. We raised them to be better men than this. You did raise them to be better, I said. This isn't your fault. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I think we should focus on practical matters. The divorce is final, David is the father, and we need to figure out how to handle that going forward. Handle it? I said, my voice sharp. This isn't a business transaction, Michael. This is about a child who's going to grow up knowing their father is their uncle, and their uncle was married to their mother. This is about explaining to a 5-year-old why Daddy and Uncle Michael don't talk anymore. Emma reached over and squeezed my hand. What do you need from this family, Sarah? What would make this easier for you and the baby? I've been thinking about this question for weeks. I need honesty. No more secrets, no more protecting each other from consequences. If we're going to be connected to this child, everyone needs to commit to telling the truth. David leaned forward. I'm committed to that. I've told my parents everything about my feelings for Sarah, about knowing Michael's secret, about my decision to sleep with her when she was vulnerable. No more lies. And I've told them about the vasectomy, the affair, everything, Michael added. They know the whole truth about what I did. Patricia looked at both her sons with a mixture of love and disappointment. I still don't understand how you both thought deceiving Sarah was acceptable. How you both thought you could manipulate someone we all care about. Because we're selfish, David said simply. I was selfish when I decided to sleep with Sarah instead of telling her the truth about Michael. Michael was selfish when he chose to protect his finances over his wife's emotional well-being. We both put our own needs ahead of hers. Robert nodded grimly. And now Sarah is paying the price for both of your selfishness. She's going to raise a child alone because neither of you could be honest. She doesn't have to raise the child alone. David said quickly, I want to be involved. I want to be a father. That's Sarah's decision to make, Emma interjected. She doesn't owe you access to the child just because you're the biological father, not after what you did. The conversation continued for 2 hours, with everyone sharing their perspectives on the situation. Patricia cried when she talked about how excited she'd been about becoming a grandmother, only to learn that the child was conceived through deception and betrayal. Robert expressed his anger at both his sons for putting their own interests ahead of family loyalty. Michael surprised everyone by speaking honestly about his feelings. I know everyone expects me to be jealous or angry about David and Sarah, but I'm not. I fell out of love with Sarah years ago, and I should have been man enough to admit it. If David can make her happy, if he can be the father and partner she deserves, then maybe something good can come out of this mess. Don't try to rewrite history, Michael, I said. You weren't thinking about my happiness when you were planning to destroy my life. You don't get to be magnanimous now. You're right. I'm not trying to be noble. I'm just saying that I don't want the baby to grow up thinking their father and uncle hate each other. Whatever happens between David and me, we need to find a way to coexist for the child's sake. The most difficult part of the conversation came when we discussed how to handle the situation publicly. In a small town like ours, the story was already spreading. People knew Michael and I were divorced, and my pregnancy was obviously going to raise questions once the baby was born. I think we tell the truth, I said. Not all the details, but the basic facts. Michael and I divorced due to irreconcilable differences. David is the father of my baby. We're all committed to doing what's best for the child. People are going to talk, Patricia said, worried. People are already talking, but I'd rather deal with gossip than lies. I'm tired of secrets and deception, Emma spoke up. Sarah's right. The truth might be embarrassing, but it's better than building more lies on top of the ones that already exist. By the end of the meeting, we'd established some basic ground rules. David would be involved in the child's life if I agreed, but he would have to earn that privilege through consistent, honest behavior. Michael would stay out of the situation completely unless his presence was specifically requested. The family would support whatever decisions I made about custody and visitation. Most importantly, everyone agreed that the child's well-being would be the priority. Whatever conflicts existed between the adults, the baby would grow up knowing they were loved and wanted Dot as we prepared to leave. Patricia pulled me aside. Sarah, I know my sons have hurt you terribly, but I hope you'll still consider us family. This baby will be our grandchild, and we'd like to be part of their life if you'll let us. Of course, I said, surprising myself with how easily the words came. You and Robert have always been good to me. What your sons did doesn't change that. Patricia hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. We love you, Sarah. We've always thought of you as a daughter, and that hasn't changed. Driving home with Emma, I felt drained but oddly hopeful. The family meeting had been painful, but it had also cleared the air. Everyone now knew where they stood, what the expectations were, and what the consequences would be for future deception. How are you feeling about everything? Emma asked. scared but free. For the first time in months, I feel like I have control over my own life. The truth is out, the divorce is final, and I can start making decisions based on what I actually want, instead of what other people have manipulated me into thinking I want. And David, how are you feeling about him? I don't know yet. I'm still angry about the deception, but I can see that he's genuinely remorseful. And this baby deserves to have a father who wants to be involved. I'm willing to see if David can prove he's changed, but it's going to take time. Emma nodded. You don't have to forgive anyone on their timeline, Sarah. You take as long as you need to heal and figure out what you want. As we pulled into my driveway, I felt the baby kick strongly. Soon, I would be holding this child, this unexpected blessing who had emerged from such a complicated situation. Whatever happened next, I was determined to give them a life filled with honesty, love, and stability, all the things that had been missing from their conception but would define their childhood. 3 weeks later, I signed the lease on a small apartment across town. The house Michael and I had shared held too many memories of deception and betrayal. I needed a fresh start, a place that was entirely mine, where I could build a new life for myself and my baby. The apartment was on the second floor of a converted Victorian house, with hardwood floors, large windows, and a small nursery that got morning sunlight. It wasn't as spacious as the house, but it felt honest in a way my old home never had. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, every decision was mine alone. My colleagues at the library had been incredibly supportive through the divorce. Word had gotten around town about the situation, not all the details, but enough for people to understand that I was starting over as a single mother. Instead of judgment, I had received mostly kindness and offers of help. Sarah, I have a crib that my grandson outgrew, Mrs. Henderson, the head librarian, told me. It's in perfect condition if you'd like to have it. Dr. Patricia Kim, who frequented the library for research, offered to be my pediatrician. Single mothers need extra support, she said simply. I'd be honored to care for your baby. Even people I barely knew were reaching out. The woman who owned the coffee shop where David and I had our confrontational conversation approached me one afternoon. I couldn't help but overhear that day when you and that young man were talking, she said quietly. I just wanted you to know that if you ever need anything childcare, a meal, someone to talk to, my door is open. The kindness of near strangers was healing in a way I hadn't expected. After months of feeling isolated and deceived by the people closest to me, the generosity of my community reminded me that there were still good people in the world. David had been respectful of my need for space, while still demonstrating his commitment to being involved. He'd send a check every week to help with pregnancy expenses, along with brief notes asking about my health and the baby's development. He never demanded responses or pushed for more contact than I was ready for. 2 weeks before my due date, he called with a request. Sarah, I know you might not be ready for this, but I'd like to be present when the baby is born. I want to be there from the very beginning of their life. I've been expecting this request and had already made my decision. You can be there, but only if you understand that this is about the baby, not about us. You're there as the father, not as my partner or support person. Emma will be my support person. I understand. Thank you for letting me be part of this moment. David, there are going to be ground rules. You don't make medical decisions. You don't speak for me to doctors or nurses. You're there to meet your child, period. Agreed. I just want to be there when they take their first breath. The fuss. Conversation was easier than I'd expected. David seemed to genuinely understand that he needed to earn his place in our lives, rather than assuming he deserved it because of biology. Emma arrived the day before my due date, taking a week off work to be with me during the birth and the first few days afterward. Having her there made me realize how much I'd missed having someone I could trust completely. Are you nervous about David being at the hospital? She asked as we set up the nursery in my new apartment. A little, but I think it's the right thing to do. This baby is going to have a complicated family situation, and I want to start as I mean to go on, with honesty and with their best interests at heart. You've handled this whole situation with more grace than I would have managed. I don't feel graceful. I feel like I'm making it up as I go along. That's what parenthood is for everyone. Sarah, the difference is that you're doing it while also recovering from massive betrayal and life upheaval. The fact that you're still focused on what's best for the baby says everything about the kind of mother you're going to be. That night, I sat in the rocking chair in the nursery, my hands on my belly, talking to my unborn child. Tomorrow or the next day, you're going to enter a very complicated world, I said softly. Your father and I aren't together, and there's a lot of hurt and confusion among the adults in your life. But I want you to know that despite how you were conceived, you are completely wanted and loved. The baby kicked in response, and I smiled. Your Aunt Emma is here, and she's going to spoil you terribly. Your grandparents, all of them, are excited to meet you. Your father wants to be a good dad, and I'm going to give him the chance to prove that. And me, I'm going to love you enough to make up for all the chaos that brought you here. I thought about the woman I'd been 8 months ago, naive, trusting, desperate for a child, but unaware of the deception surrounding me. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger and more self-aware. The journey had been painful, but it had also revealed reserves of strength I didn't know I possessed. I'm not the same person I was when I got pregnant with you, I continued. I'm more careful about trust, more aware of people's motivations, more protective of my own interests. Some people might call that cynical, but I call it wisdom. And that wisdom is going to help me protect you and give you the stable life you deserve. The nursery was simple but complete, the crib Mrs. Henderson had given me. A changing table I'd bought secondhand, a bookshelf already filled with children's. Books I'd been collecting for years. It wasn't the nursery I'd imagined sharing with a loving husband, but it was honest and real, in a way that fantasy never could have been taught. As I prepared for bed, I felt a sense of anticipation that was both exciting and terrifying. Soon, I would meet the child who had changed everything, who had exposed the lies in my marriage and forced me to rebuild my life from scratch. Tomorrow or the next day, I would become a mother, not in the way I'd planned, but in the way that was meant to. The baby kicked one more time, as if saying goodnight, and I laughed softly. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Labor started at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday in early October. I'd been having irregular contractions for days, but these were different, stronger, more purposeful. I woke Emma, who was sleeping in the guest room, and we timed the contractions for an hour before calling the doctor. It's time, Dr. Martinez said when I described what I was feeling. Head to the hospital when the contractions are 5 minutes apart. Emma helped me gather my hospital bag and drove me through the quiet streets. I called David from the car, my voice tight with pain and anticipation. The baby's coming. We're heading to Cleveland General Mall. I'll be there in 20 minutes, David said, his voice instantly alert despite the early hour. David, remember what we discussed. You're there as the father, not as my support person. I understand. I'll see you soon. The next several hours were a blur of medical personnel, monitoring equipment, and intensifying pain. Emma held my hand through each contraction while David sat quietly in the corner, clearly wanting to help but respecting the boundaries I'd set. Dr. Martinez checked my progress regularly. Her calm professionalism, exactly what I needed. You're doing beautifully, Sarah. The baby should be here by late afternoon. Around noon, my parents called from Florida. I told them the basic facts about the divorce and pregnancy, but we hadn't had a chance to talk through all the complexities. Sweetheart, we wanted to be there with you, my mother said, her voice thick with emotion. But the flight schedules, Mom, it's okay. Emma's here and everything is going well. You'll meet your grandchild soon enough. We love you, Sarah. We're so proud of how you've handled everything. As the day progressed and labor intensified, I found myself grateful for the months of preparation I'd done. Not just the practical preparation, the prenatal classes, the hospital bag, the nursery setup, but the emotional work I'd done to get ready for single motherhood. Around 4 in the afternoon, Dr. Martinez announced that it was time to push. Emma moved to my side, offering encouragement and physical support. David remained where he was, but I could see the anticipation and nervousness on his face. I can see the head, Dr. Martinez said. One more big push, Sarah. With a final surge of effort that seemed to use every ounce of strength I possessed, I felt the baby slip free. The immediate relief was overwhelming, followed quickly by the most incredible sound I'd ever heard, my baby's first cry. It's a girl, Dr. Martinez announced, holding up my daughter for me to see. She was perfect, tiny but healthy, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that clearly worked just fine. The nurse placed her on my chest, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. This was my daughter, this beautiful, innocent child who had emerged from such a complicated situation. She's gorgeous, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. I looked over at David, who was standing now, his face full of wonder and love. Would you like to meet your daughter? I asked. David approached slowly, as if he couldn't quite believe this moment was real. She's so small, he said, softly. All babies are small, I said, smiling despite my exhaustion. Would you like to hold her? The nurse helped David position his arms correctly, and I watched as he held his daughter for the first time. The expression on his face was one of pure love and protectiveness. Whatever complicated feelings existed between David and me, there was no question that he was already completely devoted to this child. What's her name? David asked quietly. I'd been thinking about this decision for weeks. I wanted a name that was strong and independent, something that wouldn't be overshadowed by the circumstances of her birth. Grace, I said. Her name is Grace Elizabeth Matthews. Grace, David repeated, testing the name. It's perfect. The next few hours were filled with medical procedures, visitors, and the surreal reality of becoming a mother. Patricia and Robert arrived with flowers and tears, clearly overwhelmed by meeting their granddaughter. They were respectful of my space while expressing their joy at Grace's arrival. She's beautiful, Sarah, Patricia said, holding Grace with the practiced ease of an experienced grandmother. She looks like David did as a baby. My own parents called again, eager for details and photos. We'll be there next week, my father promised. We can't wait to meet her. Even Michael sent a text message. Congratulations on your daughter's birth. I hope she brings you all the happiness you deserve. As evening approached and the visitors left, I found myself alone with Grace. For the first time, Emma had gone to get coffee and David was handling paperwork with the nurses. I looked down at my daughter, who was sleeping peacefully in my arms. Hello, Grace, I whispered. I'm your mom, and I've been waiting so long to meet you. She opened her eyes briefly, as if she was listening, then settled back into sleep. I studied her tiny features, looking for resemblances to myself, to David, to the various family members who would be part of her life. I know your story is going to be complicated, I told her. People are going to have opinions about how you came to be here. But I want you to know that despite everything that happened between the adults, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You made me stronger, braver, more honest than I ever was before. David returned as I was talking to Grace, and he stood quietly in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt our first real conversation. You can come in, I said. She should get to know her father, too. David sat in the chair next to my bed, his eyes never leaving Grace's face. I can't believe she's really here. I can't believe she's ours. She's mine, David. She's my daughter. You can be her father if you prove you deserve that role, but she belongs to me. I understand. And Sarah, I want you to know that I'm going to spend every day proving that I can be the father she needs and the co-parent you deserve. Actions, David, not words. Actions. As I settled in for my first night as a mother, I felt a sense of completion I'd never experienced before. Grace was here, healthy and perfect. I was free from the deception and manipulation that had defined my marriage. I had a chance to build something new and honest for both of us. The road ahead would be challenging single motherhood, co-parenting with David, navigating the complex family dynamics that would always be part of Grace's life. But holding my daughter, feeling her tiny heart beating against my chest, I knew that we could handle whatever came next. We were a family now, unconventional but real, built on truth instead of lies. Grace stirred in my arms and made a soft sound, as if she was dreaming. I kissed her forehead gently and whispered, "Welcome to the world, baby girl. We're going to be just fine." 6 months after Grace's birth, I sit in the rocking chair in our sunlit nursery, watching my daughter play with her toys on the floor. She's crawling now, pulling herself up on furniture, babbling constantly in her own secret language. Her dark hair has grown into soft curls, and her eyes, David's eyes, are bright with curiosity about everything around her. The journal I started keeping after her birth lies open on my lap. Writing has become my way of processing this incredible transformation, of documenting not just Grace's milestones, but my own journey from victim to survivor to thriving single mother. Today marks 6 months since Grace was born. I write 6 months since I held her for the first time and felt my heart expand in ways I never knew were possible. 6 months of learning that love isn't always complicated. Sometimes it's as simple as a baby's laugh, or the weight of her sleeping body against your chest. The legal aspects of my new life have been resolved more smoothly than I dared hope. The divorce settlement gave me financial security, and David has been faithfully contributing child support despite my initial reluctance to accept it. Rebecca was right. The court considered it Grace's right, not mine to refuse. David has also proven himself in ways that continue to surprise me. He visits twice a week, always respectfully, always focused on Grace rather than trying to win me back. He's taken parenting classes, baby-proofed his apartment, and learned to change diapers with the dedication of someone studying for finals. Last month, he asked if he could take Grace to his apartment for a few hours. I'd been dreading this request, but when the moment came, I realized I trusted him completely with our daughter's safety and well-being. Whatever his faults as a man and partner, David has become exactly the father Grace deserves. "She's lucky to have you," I told him as he buckled Grace into her car seat for their first solo outing. Both of us. Michael has kept his word about staying out of our lives. I've heard through Patricia that he and Jennifer are engaged, planning a wedding for next spring. I feel nothing about this news. No anger, no sadness, just a mild interest in how someone I used to know is doing. The complete absence of emotion tells me how thoroughly I've healed from that relationship. My parents visited last month. Their first trip to meet Grace, they fell in love with her instantly, of course, but they also expressed their pride in how I'd handled everything. "You've become such a strong woman, Sarah," my mother said as we watched my father play peekaboo with Grace. "I know this wasn't the path you planned, but you've created something beautiful here." "I've learned that the path you plan isn't always the path you need," I replied. "Sometimes the detours lead you exactly where you're supposed to be." The town has accepted our unconventional family structure with more grace than I'd expected. People know the basic facts that Grace's father is David, that Michael and I divorced, that we're all committed to doing what's best for the child. There's been some gossip, but most of it has been sympathetic rather than judgmental. Mrs. Henderson has become an unofficial grandmother figure. stopping by regularly with books for grace and wisdom for me. Children don't need perfect circumstances, she told me one afternoon as Grace napped in her arms. They need love, consistency, and adults who put their needs first. Grace has all of that. Dr. Kim has become more than Grace's pediatrician. She's become a friend and mentor, helping me navigate the challenges of single motherhood with patience and wisdom. You're doing everything right, she assured me at Grace's 6-month checkup. She's healthy, happy, and clearly attached to you. That's what matters. The question people ask most often is whether David and I will eventually become a couple. It's a reasonable question given that we're co-parenting a child and that he's made his feelings for me clear. But I'm not ready to answer it, and David has stopped pushing for a decision. I'm content to be Grace's father and your friend, he told me recently. If something more develops naturally over time, wonderful. If not, I'll still be the best father and co-parent I can be. His patience and respect for my boundaries have actually made me more open to the possibility of a relationship with him someday. The desperate, manipulative man who took advantage of my vulnerability has been replaced by someone who's learned to put others' needs ahead of his own desires. But I'm in no hurry to make that decision. For now, I'm focused on building the life Grace and I deserve. I've started seeing a counselor who specializes in helping people recover from deception and betrayal. The sessions have helped me understand that what happened to me wasn't my fault, that being trusting and vulnerable doesn't make someone weak or stupid. I've learned to set boundaries, to trust my instincts, and to value my own needs as much as I value others. You've done the hardest work, my counselor told me in our last session. You've rebuilt your life from a foundation of truth instead of lies. Everything from here forward gets to be your choice. Grace starts babbling from her play area, and I close the journal to focus on her. She's pulled herself up against the coffee table and is bouncing excitedly, proud of her accomplishment. Good job, baby girl, I tell her, lifting her into my arms. You're getting so strong and independent. As I hold her, I think about the letter I've been writing to Grace, the one I plan to give her when she's old enough to understand the complexities of her origin story. In it, I explain the circumstances of her conception, the deception that surrounded it, and the truth about her parenthood. But mostly, I focus on how wanted and loved she is, how her arrival transformed pain into purpose and chaos into clarity. Dear Grace, the letter begins, you were conceived during one of the most difficult periods of my life, but you became the reason I found the strength to rebuild everything. You taught me that love doesn't require perfect circumstances, it creates them. You showed me that sometimes the most unexpected blessings emerge from the deepest pain. The afternoon sun streams through the nursery windows, casting everything in golden light. Grace reaches for the dust motes dancing in the air, laughing with delight at something only she can see. This moment, this perfect, ordinary moment, is exactly what I fought so hard to protect. My phone buzzes with a text from David. How are my girls today? Would you like me to bring dinner over tonight? I text back, we're good. Dinner sounds nice. Grace has been asking for her daddy all day. It's not quite true. Grace's babbling is still mostly nonsense, but David lights up every time I suggest she's been thinking about him. As I prepare Grace for her afternoon nap, I reflect on how much has changed in the 18 months since I found that vasectomy receipt. The woman who discovered that piece of paper was trapped in a web of lies, desperate for a child and completely powerless over her own life. The woman I am today is free, strong, and building a future based on honesty and choice. Grace settles into sleep easily, her tiny hand curled around my finger. Looking down at her peaceful face, I know that every painful step of the journey was worth it to arrive at this moment. She is my redemption, my purpose, my greatest love, not despite the circumstances of her conception, but because of how those circumstances revealed my own strength. The truth set me free, but Grace made me whole. and that, I write in my journal as she sleeps, is the real miracle of our story.